Welcome to Nava Podcast with Leah Cardenas and Stella Pashos.
Let's explore the true essence of Nava.
Nava embodies the concept of beauty in all its forms. It represents the inner radiance that each woman possesses and the unique qualities that make her truly remarkable.
Our mission is to share the stories of inspiring women who are making their mark in the areas of fashion, health, lifestyle, and family. Our aim is to curate meaningful conversations where the journeys and experiences of our guests can inspire you in your own life.
We started this podcast to create a space where everyone can feel beautiful, inspired, and empowered.
Nava is not just a podcast, it's a celebration of the incredible women who have shaped our lives and the countless others who are yet to share their stories.
We can't wait for you to join us. Welcome to our latest episode featuring Amber, where we delve into her inspiring journey that challenges conventional notions of success. With a background in the medical devices industry and a successful career in sales, Amber made a daring leap into running her own Airbnb business, driven by the belief that true happiness isn't solely tied to financial achievements. Along the way, she discovered the importance of finding a healthy work-life balance and the rewards of embracing new experiences, including living in different countries. Amber opens up about her heartfelt decision to embrace a different path and find contentment in not pursuing IVF. She opens up about having to come to a place of acceptance and gratitude for the life they've created, cherishing the opportunities and experiences that await her and her husband, Brad. Amber's story is a testament to the power of resilience and the willingness to start anew, even if it means rebuilding from scratch. Join us as we explore her insights on redefining success, calculated risks, and embracing the adventure of life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nava Podcast. I'm Leah Cardenas.
And I'm Stella Pashos.
And today we have Amber Merlot.
Hey, guys. Thank you for having me.
Amber is a very special guest joining us today and a very close friend of mine. Amber, thank you so much for coming on. Today we're going to discuss how you transitioned from a successful sales career in medical device to running and turning into your own Airbnb superhost in the beautiful town of Byron Bay.
Yes, it's definitely been a journey. Yes. Where would you guys like me to start?
Well, we're going to start off with our Nava speed dating. So I guess our listeners can have a really quick snapshot on who you are, and it's a little bit of fun.
Nice. Sounds good. I'm ready.
All right. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird.
What's one word to describe yourself?
Oh, God. I don't know. Probably one word. God, does anyone ever have an answer for this? I guess I would say, what's one word for I don't know, likes and trying new things. Honestly, I don't know what one word would be. I'm not sure. Can we come to that at the end? I'll think of something.
Yeah. What's your one word, Leah?
Busy.
Mine's late.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I don't know. I would just say excited. I'm
That's
usually
true.
My default is I'm just so excited for everything. And especially with what we're going to get into, I'm just life is so great at the moment. And so I'm just excited about everything. So that would be
that's your word. That's so good.
Yes.
What is the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
Oh God, probably when I married my husband after knowing him for a year, and we had never been together in the same city. We had done long distance, and we got married so that I could get a visa to be with him in England. Didn't know if it was going to work out, but I did it. We did it in a courthouse in LA. We had strangers as our witnesses, and we're still married almost 16 years later. So it worked out.
Favorite way to unwind and decompress?
Oh God, probably. I have so many ways. Probably going for a walk on the beach with my husband and my dog.
What are your 4 go-to places in Byron Bay?
Oh God, there's so many good places. So my number one is Social Remedy, which is where my sauna and my ice bath and my gym is. I go there almost every day. It's the best. I love Jimmy's Coffee, which is just around the corner from me. It's a little coffee caravan. And other two, Ray's on Wategos, which is the best restaurant. It's such a vibe. It's like great for people watching. It's so beautiful. And then my fourth place would probably be my sister's house because she lives like 10 minutes from me and I go there all the time. So that would be the 4 places.
So good. All right. Well, the last question of our speed dating is, what is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Oh gosh, the best. Like everything's going to be okay because it always is. Like I'm going to be 41 this year and like everything that I've gone through in my life, like if I could just, like my mom would say like, honey, everything's going to be okay. And I'd be like, whatever I was going through at the time, like, no, it's not going to be okay. Or like, I'm never going to get over this or whatever that thing was, but like everything's going to be okay. And it really does all work out. As cliche as that sounds, like everything always works out. So enjoy the ride, I guess. This is so cliche, but I guess it's where it comes from, right?
Love that.
All right. Thank you so much, Amber, for the quick speed dating. We're now going to get into the episode, which we're really excited about hearing your story.
Nice.
If you could please talk to us about your career in medical and how you got into medical device and what was a career in sales all about?
Yeah. So I was in some form of like a sales job from the time I can remember. I was like the little kid. I mean, this was the 80s too. So it was like probably more safe, or we didn't know how dangerous it was out there. But like I would knock on doors and be like, hey, can I wash your car? Can I clean your kitchen? So I was always like out there hustling for like money. And so when I graduated college and I was like a waitress in high school, and in America, like you hustle for those tips, and it's like a sales job. You're like always trying to just provide amazing service and you want more tips, all the things. And so I went to university in LA. I went to UCLA and I got a psychology degree, which doesn't really mean much there unless you like actually further specialize and become a psychologist. And I knew I didn't want to do that. So I had heard that sales reps for like medical device or pharmaceutical companies kill it and they make a lot of money. And so I thought, okay, like I can totally do this. This sounds like it'll be interesting because I can be in operating rooms and talk to surgeons and nurses. And I like love talking to people, but I also knew that I like had the organizational skills and like literally everything that was required to like smash my targets. So when I moved to England, I had just graduated uni and I married Brad, my husband. And one of his friends got me an intro. So I started a medical device job in England and I just loved it. I was like, I can't believe I get paid for this. Like my days are so interesting. You get so much autonomy. And I was just like in my car listening to like music. I don't think podcasts were a thing yet because this was like 17 years ago or 18 years ago. But I just was like, this is so cool. I get so much freedom and I'm making more money than all my friends, which is at the time what I cared about. When you're like in your early 20s, you just are like out there hustling. And now I have a totally different viewpoint on money and what defines success. But at the time I was like, I just want to make as much money as possible. So I did that. And then we moved to Australia like 12 or 13 years ago. And then I started working for a medical company here. And then I did that. I mean, the years went by so fast because I was working in a type of medical device like sector with trauma. So I would sell like the instrumentation and like the plates and the screws for people that broke their bones. And so you couldn't ever predict when those cases were going to happen. So I literally was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I did that type of medical device for like 7 years. And it was awesome, but I got so burned out. So it was great. I made a lot of money and it was awesome. And it helped my husband, like us, build up the resources for him to be able to start his business and for us to kind of get our start with like our own house and things like that. So from that point of view, like it ticked all the boxes of what I wanted it to in my 20s. But then as I got into my 30s, I was like, I can't do this forever. And I like need to do something else. And like, what can I do? So that's kind of how like that chapter of my life.
How did you, just out of interest, if you're comfortable sharing, And obviously I've come from working in medical devices too.
Yeah.
That's how we met.
Yes.
Would you be comfortable sharing what a typical medical device rep would be earning?
Yeah. So at the time I made but this was like, what was like 12 years ago, like my really good years, I was making like I think my best year I made 330. And on average though, I was making like 250, like after I left my trauma. So when I was in trauma, I was making high twos to mid threes. And then when I left trauma and I wasn't, because the reason why people did trauma was because the commission rate was so high, but like you literally worked all the time. And then when I got burned out and I went to a different company, the one where we met, Stella, it was like 250. Like as long as I was hitting my numbers, I was making between like 250 and 280. So yeah, it was great. It was great. But then, like all the trade-offs that come with it, I just was like, it comes to a point where you're like, this isn't necessarily worth it anymore. And really, people are making so much more money than that these days with different types of sales jobs. Like, tech sales, all the things, Stella, working at Salesforce, there are people that make a lot more money than that. So, but at the time I was like, I am balling out of control. Like I grew up with not any money at all. And so to make that kind of money, I was like, wow, like I can buy a house. I never thought I could do that. So I'm so grateful for what that career gave me, because it really gave my husband and I like the footing to be able to do everything we're doing now.
So we know that you've transitioned from your career in medical devices and sales. Can you please talk to us a little bit about that transition?
Yeah, so I tried to leave medical device multiple times. The first time was my sister, my brother-in-law, my twin sister, who was also used to be in medical device sales, who has since left, did the same thing I'm doing. Her husband, and then another coworker that I had, we built this platform, basically like an app and a technical platform that's visitor management for medical device reps to go in and out of hospitals. It's called vendor credentialing. I won't go into like the weeds on it, but essentially we built this platform so that we could start a business. And I left medical for a year to launch that business. It's called Air Vendor. And then realized like pretty quickly, it's super stressful not to be making a wage. It's very stressful to be working with family, especially when you're not making any money, like trying to get a company off the ground and all your money's going into it, but you're not seeing any return yet. And so I worked there for about 12 months, and it got to a point where, I learned so many lessons in that time. I learned, like, for me, working with family in a business is, unless it's my husband, the trade-off isn't worth it, just because of all the, just because like all of the things that can come up with working with family, and striking that balance between all the stresses that come with the business, but wanting to keep your family like intact and not have the stresses of the business bleed over into the relationship with your family. And I did not have the ability at that time to do that. And so my sister ended up getting in a really precarious situation where her and her husband and myself, we were the ones launching the business, and it was just so stressful. So I ended up leaving the business and going back to medical device, because my husband and I, we needed the resources. We couldn't do 12. We had done 12 months with me not working. And he was like, you have to go back. And I was like, damn it. But I did. But I was also grateful that I could. But I was like, okay, this didn't work out. But like, that was my first run of trying to leave medical device and start my own business. Side note, the business is still going, and my brother-in-law is doing so well with it. He's persevered when I could not. And so, it was a great learning lesson. And then was that 3 years later? So I went back to the company that Stella and I met at, and then COVID happened. And then, as we all know, like that time is such a blur. I was living in Melbourne still at that time. And, it had always been on sort of, my husband and I, we had talked that we wanted to move to Byron. We would come here like literally every chance we got. We'd spend Christmas here. We would spend Easter here. All the time that we had, like that was free, we would come to Byron. And my twin sister, Hillary, her and her husband were already like, they were going to make the move as soon as they got permanent residency. So it was kind of like, okay, we're going to make the move. My husband has a building business in Melbourne. And so he was like making the proper transitions to get off the tools and do more of the high level things so that we could move there. And then COVID, and we were kind of like 2 years out from moving, and then COVID happened. And, you guys are from Melbourne, so the lockdowns were crazy and like so stressful, and just, it was such a pressure cooker of an environment in Melbourne. And so we left during COVID, and I had told him, I promise we'll go back, because he wasn't ready to transition out of his business. They're still running projects there. His business partner didn't know that we were, there were so many elements that we hadn't figured out yet. And then we quarantined, we came up to Byron, and my sister was already here, my twin was, and she had already transferred with the company that Stella and I worked at and was making it work. She was living in Byron and like working over the border. So I was like, okay, at least I know that that's a possibility, right? We get to Byron after being in lockdown for, what was that? Like, it was like at least 6 months. And I had my first taste of freedom, and I told my husband, like, I'm not going back. We can do long distance if you want. And while you close the loop on things with your business and set things up so you can do it remotely, but like, I cannot physically go back. And so he was like, okay. And luckily his business partner is and was amazing. He runs their projects on the ground in Melbourne to this day. Well, my husband does all the high level stuff. And so I got here, we were living on my sister's property. We were like desperately looking for somewhere to live and like buy a house. But this was when the property market was like freaking insane. And it was like, especially in Byron, the secret was getting out that like, now that people knew that you could work from anywhere, like before, Byron used to be more horrible. But now, since everybody was like, oh my God, I can live in Byron and still do my job, it's not just like a holiday destination. It was crazy. Like some things were going for like over like $1 million over asking. Like it was crazy. Even more than that. Like, I mean, I have the craziest stories. And in New South Wales, you can get what's called gazumped. Like in Melbourne, if you sign a contract, the sellers are locked in and they can't sell to anyone else. But in New South Wales, where Byron is, someone can come and offer more. So we kept getting gazumped on all these properties. But this is where Airbnb comes in, because when we got here, my husband was like, hey, you have to get a job. And I was like, okay, cool. So I got one in medical again. And I was going to Brisbane. That's like 2 hours north. So I got another medical device job, and I was like, cool. But like figuring out, like, I don't want to do this forever, but like, I'll do this for now. We need to get a mortgage. I need to have an income. So I'll do it. And then, we were living on my sister's property. This is where Airbnb comes in. So my sister had bought a property in Byron, and it had like one house. Like, this is kind of a thing with some of the more like the properties that are like in the hinterlands, is people put like a lot of dwellings on them and like rent them out. Like everybody here is like hustling, trying to stay here because there aren't a lot of big businesses here and like jobs. So like everybody in Byron in the surrounding area, like everybody's a hustler. Everybody is. It's like super cool. So the property that my sister bought, it had her main house. It had a little it was like a studio. It was like a studio. And then there was a 2-car garage. And my husband, being a builder, was like, hey, and because he was up here, he had some free time like on the weekends. And so he said, in exchange for like our rent, why don't, like in lieu of our rent, paying, like living on the property, because we lived on their little granny flat, which was, like a 1-bedroom studio. My husband was like, why don't I like manage this project for you, and we'll turn your 2-car garage into a 2-bedroom luxury Airbnb cottage. And my sister was like, okay, cool. They had like some leftover resources from the sale of their house in America. And so this was before building costs went like crazy as well. So it was like perfect timing. And he built her like this beautiful 2-bedroom cottage in the back of their property. And I say all of this and share it because as soon as it went live on Airbnb, it was like ding, 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 like bookings out the wazoo. And we were like, whoa, it was so cool, so crazy. And we were like, oh my God, like this thing, because my sister had been coming with us to Byron for all these years as well. And we had always said, like, God, like, there isn't anything here that's like super, super high end luxury, like that's actually at a price point that's accessible. Like, and we always would say, like, God, if Brad built his houses up here, like they would kill. Like, we were all just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So my husband, put his magic touch into my sister's property. So beautiful. And it was like luxury, but at an accessible price point. And she was fully booked. And it didn't take that much time because you do like things like 3-night minimums and things like that. Like, really, it doesn't take, once you have the Airbnb set up, it doesn't take that much time. And so when my husband and I saw what was happening with her Airbnb, they were making like between like $7,000 and $9,000 a month off of this thing that they had converted. And so we were like, oh my God, we can do that too. So when we were looking for a house, and like I live in Byron, so like this probably is just like, I'm the walking stereotype. Like, I love to manifest. I'm totally into like, you create your own reality, and like really we can create anything we want. And so my husband and I had this really detailed list where we were like, this is where we want to live. This is what it needs to look like. I mean, the list was like so long, even down to like, but part of the list was that we had to have the ability to either build our own granny flat or convert part of an existing part of the house to an Airbnb, because we're like, also, side note, that was how we could afford to buy a house here because we're like, we need to use the money from the Airbnb to pay our mortgage. So we were like, okay, cool. We had sold our place in Melbourne, and we're like, all right, we're looking for a place. And we ended up finding like the perfect house for us, which was like very rundown, really weird layout. Like, basically a builder needed to buy it because it was a mess. It was just super weird. It was like a death trap for kids. It was just not safe. And so, but the cool part is that at the front of the house, like it's on the beach. It's like 2 kilometers from the middle of Byron. It's on a dog beach. Like, ticked all these crazy boxes that we had. And the front part of the house has like a little pop out, which used to be the master suite, which was accessible through the inner part of the house. But Brad was like, why don't we wall it off? And there's actually a second driveway in front of the property that's separate. And so when we saw it, we were like, oh, this is like perfect for us. So even though we didn't have the resources at the time to renovate the entire property, we're like, okay, we'll put, because we were going to have to renovate the whole house eventually anyway. So that was part of where we were like, okay, it's justified for us to put in. I think we spent like $130,000 on gutting and renovating the front part of this, like of the house, and making it completely separate. But we would have had to have done that anyway. So for us, we were like, okay, this is an investment we're making, not only in a business that's going to cash flow and pay our mortgage, but we're going to renovate this part of the house eventually anyway, so we could justify spending the money on it. And so we did. And then it was so fun. We did like all the design choices together. And then this was like, when was it? So we bought the house in July of like 2 years ago. And then it took probably like 12 weeks for Brad to do the reno. And when we put it on Airbnb, it was so crazy. Within like, I think I told you so, within like 3 days, we had like 3 months of bookings. And it was all people from Australia. And because at the time nobody could come in, but we were just like, whoa. And we just couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe that people were booking part of our house that we didn't, because it's just the 2 of us. And so we were like, this is a part of the house we wouldn't use anyway. We've created this beautiful, I mean, it is really beautiful. It's a beautiful space. It's just like a 1 bedroom with a bathroom and a small kitchen. And yeah, it was crazy. So that was the beginning of my Airbnb journey. I've said a lot. Do you guys have any questions?
It's just so interesting to listen about how you navigated all those different challenges. And I guess that transition from Melbourne to Byron would have been really hard, especially with having to close off your husband's business also. But I love that you were both able to be part of this new journey together, that you both invested into this new space.
Yes, for sure. Well, and his business still is going on in Melbourne. So he goes back when his projects are finished, and he just does like the high level finance, like architect stuff. So he has an amazing business partner. And it's cool because, I talked about how like my experience with having a business partner, like family member, didn't work out for me. And so I would never do that again. But for him and his business, having a business partner, like because they have the same work ethic and everything like that, and they really trust each other, it's an amazing, fruitful, like amazing relationship. So partnerships do work, just not with me.
So that's all, and it takes a lot of courage to be able to walk away from something that you thought would work really well when it hasn't. So sometimes it can work, but it's amazing in the rare kind of circumstances where it works really amazingly, like in that case.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Well, and the more, there's so many entrepreneurs up here, and I think being like, because we are rural and remote in Byron, like most of the people that I've met that live up here now are business owners. And so I get a lot of information. Like I'm always chatting to people about what they do and like how they made the move up to Byron. And they're like, it's equal. Like some people have the most amazing business partners and it's great, but other people don't. But there's like an infinite number of ways to make a business work. And a lot of times people fail a lot before they're successful, which is not a lot of things. It's not a lot. I think people talk about it more now, but like, yeah, even though Airbnb wasn't a success, hasn't been a success yet in the way that I thought it would be, like I learned a lot of really valuable lessons that I've carried over into the Airbnb. But yeah, the Airbnb is just like, it's the best. I'm like Airbnb for life. I love it. I'm obsessed.
I'm really interested in what you said, that you brought over some of the lessons you've learned from your previous entrepreneur stints.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges you faced in moving into the Airbnb business in Byron?
You know what? Like, I guess the biggest challenge, to be honest, and like this is just my experience, and I think because my husband is a builder, he's like, we've been together for so long, I've seen him do so many projects. For us, it was actually like really fun and really, it wasn't really stressful. It wasn't, just because it was like, but we had like 15 years prior where it's like all the stress of like figuring out money for his business, like having to like, fire sale a home that we lived in because we needed money to fund his next project. So it's like, it was almost like the all the lessons that we had learned from everything from his business coming up, because he's been like building houses and doing stuff for like almost 20 years. It was like we had learned so many crazy lessons, because a lot of it's around the finance component. Like I would say for sure, the biggest like the reason why things have been so successful for us in Byron is because we've put it all on the line, like every time. And even if that meant that we would lose everything, because when we were in England together, for example, like that was during 2008. And that was the GFC. And I know Australia didn't go through it, but England definitely did. And like he had his own business then. And like, I remember one of the big like companies that was supposed to pay him like £250,000, and we were like 24. So that was so much, like that was everything to us. They went bankrupt and we never got our money. And we were like, crap, like, we were devastated, but then equally, then the like houses in England were so cheap. And so my husband was able to buy them for like nothing, renovate them, and then have rentals, which we later sold to then start the seeds of his building business here. So it's like, obviously, again, another cliche is like hindsight is 2020. But at the time we were navigating all these crazy, scary situations. But it's like, if you can reframe them and be like, all right, well, like A, what's the lesson here? B, what is like, how can we reframe this so we can see the opportunity in it as well and just like do our best? But we in terms of like the mentality of putting it all on the line, we did that I mean, we still do it now. We still do it now, is that like, you know, we have these conversations where we're like, okay, like if this house doesn't sell, or if usually it's that conversation, if this house doesn't sell, or this house doesn't get valued at what we need it to get that loan, to leverage it, to do this thing, then we're like, are we okay with losing everything? And for us, like, we are, like, because we're like, we'll just do it again. Like, yes, it would be devastating at this point because we've achieved so much together. But if we did lose it all, we're like, at least like we tried, you know? So that's all to say that, you know, and not a lot of people are willing to do that. And I get it. Like, people have kids, people have like, not everybody can be like, if we lose everything, that's fine. But we were both of the mentality from the get-go that it was like, let's have a go. Like, if we don't have a go, like, we're never going to know like what our true potential is. And so when it came to Byron, it was like everything that we had worked towards just kind of opened up. Like, we sold our property, our main house in Melbourne. We used that money as a deposit for our house in where we live now. We had some left over so we could do the reno. Then we created this beautiful space. And then it was on Airbnb. Like, it was kind of like we took all the lessons that we had learned over the previous 15 years and executed to do this thing with Airbnb. And to be honest, like, it has been easy. But that's because we've gone through all these other crazy, horrible, stressful things. And so this to us was just like, oh, we're just doing what we know. So we know it's going to work. And, you know, we had 15 years of lessons prior to that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. Sounds like a lot of calculated risk.
Yes.
And being comfortable with your worst case scenario, and just obviously that you've learned all the financial lessons in the past, but you're really comfortable with being like, okay, worst case, we know that this is what may happen and we're comfortable with that. And so let's just do it.
Yes, exactly. Well, and even now, so we ended up buying a second property, which is like 4 doors down from our house.
Is that the one you're in now?
Yes, it's what I'm in now, tied on Telos. It was it's a little beach bungalow cabin, and we just applied the same formula. So we knew that my occupancy rates for my studio were usually around 90%. So I usually only had like 3 days a month that weren't full, and we average about $8,000 a month. In low season, it's about 7, and then in high season, it can be like up to 10. But we average about 8. So we knew what we could make there. So this cabin we bought, and it was really run down. It was like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and we gutted it and turned it into a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom luxury for couples and like 1 small child. So we knew our niche. We knew that like, because everyone was telling us in this little community where we live, where there's other cabins, they're like, keep it as a 2-bedroom, like you're going to make way more money. And we were like, no. Like the people that we are appealing to are like people that want something higher end in Byron, like on the beach, and they have disposable income. So we didn't want, like my sister, for example, who has her 2-bedroom cottage and then her main house that she Airbnbs. She's seen since the interest rates rise that a lot of families are cutting back on their extra spending. And so she has seen her bookings decrease, which has caused her to long-term rent out those 2 dwellings on her property. Whereas with my husband and I, ours was still full. Like, because we're like, oh, people with no kids or maybe just one little kid still have money. So at least there's enough of them to book our property. So we went with what we knew. We got this one, and it's like 4 doors down from my house. And so it's great. It's not a lot of travel time. And yeah, it's working out well so far.
So for those that don't know, I'm sure everyone's kind of heard of Byron Bay, but it's known for its tourist destination, its beautiful beaches. There's so many amazing restaurants and bars. There are also around, from my Google searching, 2,500 active Airbnb listings. What kind of helped you influence your design choices? And really, obviously, you've spoken about the niche and sticking to a studio where it's perfect for couples with disposable income, that they can splash a bit more cash to have a more luxurious stay, and that's working really well. But what else has influenced the way that you styled and marketed your Airbnb to stand out?
So I would say with the styling, like I one thing that I did that my husband and I would do is that I would like find what I liked, and then we would put it on like a virtual board and then kind of see how everything looked together. But we've had a lot of experience making design choices together, not for the soft furnishings necessarily, but for like the cabinetry and bathroom tiles and like, the color of the fixtures and things like that. So that point, that was like very easy for us to do, but we just sort of, we made those choices together. I would say that a really like if I had my time to do over again with my studio is we hired interior designers for our main part of our house, which we're renovating now. And I learned so much from them about like how you balance the aesthetic and like how to do different textures and like warm versus cool. And if I had my time to do over again, I would have like followed an interior designer or like tried to, get, how so many people are doing like their own courses these days, e-courses, like find like an interior designer that gives you like, like what are the main tenets of interior styling? Because definitely like my studio vibe, we just did like it was like luxury linens, like beautiful rugs, a really big, comfortable king size bed that felt like a cloud. And like all of my linens are, actually, these are some things that I did, which helped me stand out. So all my bedding is like French linen. And because I'm doing my own laundry, because if you like try to source that out, it's like astronomically expensive and it just takes away from your profit. But because I do all my laundry on site, we got like the best bedding, the best everything. So when people came, they were like, "Oh my God, this bed is so comfortable." All my towels are organic cotton. And so really, and like giving guests all the extras. So like not nickel and diming, that's an American term, but like not like nickel and, do you guys know what that means? Like not nickel and diming them, like,
like trying to save.
What's up?
Yeah,
I would give like, like we would give them wine. We give wine, we give chocolate that's local. We watched this really cool series on Netflix from that gave like vacation rental tips around like the first night that people stay. You take 10% of whatever that amount is. So our prices range from $300 to $450. And so we spend at least $30 like on a bottle of Pellegrino, a bottle of wine, and like these local chocolates that are, so it's like having people come in, and it's not, because when we would come here as tourists before, I would be like, God, sometimes you would spend like, for a house, you would spend like $1,000 a night over Christmas. And I'm like, these people only gave me like one towel, Oh, and I do robes. I do plush robes. So like Stella knows I'm always in my robe. So we give robes, and really just giving them so much more value for their money, so that it's not only are they on the beach and they can hear the ocean from their room, and like it's a beautiful brand new space with like, storage and all the things you want, but also like, like people feel like even though it's $300 to $500, like they felt like they were getting a lot of value for that money. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like those little touches mean everything to guests, and it really ties in from all your sales experience and your hustling from when you were younger. Customer service has been front of mind to be able to help you really give your guests an exceptional experience. And I know that you pride yourself on 5-star reviews and being a host. Like literally, she waits for the guest to leave and like just stares at her phone waiting for a review to be left.
No, but this is where like the corporate training and sales training came in so perfectly, because like I even like, especially when I was doing sales, like I got a buzz off of giving people amazing customer service. And I don't know if that's like a cultural thing, because in America, like the service standard is like great. Like people, again, you're hustling for tips most of the time in the service industry. So it's like, you just have to like go above and beyond at all times. And again, I knew that was like a gap that I was filling, because we had come to Byron so many times, and I was like, do these people even care that I'm booking through their place? Like, they didn't make me feel special at all. And so I knew that with the Airbnb that I was like, oh my God, I'm going to like provide, like my communication is going to be on point. Like I spent probably 40 hours on my, my Airbnb booklet of like all the local areas. Like it's it's like a virtual link that I have. Like I have my own website for my listings. And when they make their booking, I have like, I basically like have people go through a funnel where like the ultimate, like instead of buying something at the end, they're giving me a 5-star review. And so I did all this research on like what makes people leave a 5-star review, like how can you put wording into like their welcome email so that they know that's what you're expecting. And it was like, I mean, I think that sometimes I would call you still and be like, oh my God, I got like, someone gave me a 4-star review for location. Like, why? Like, I'd be freaking out. But then I would just do more research and I'm like, oh, okay, that's probably because I need to tweak this. And some people think that 4 stars is wonderful. You know, some people just, they aren't the kind of person that leaves a 5-star review, even if everything's perfect. So I would like tap into the psychology of it. And I literally have like a script. So people make a booking, they get an email from me with they get a message from me in the app that has like everything in it. Then when they, like a couple days beforehand, they get another thing from me and it's like, what kind of wine would you like? What time are you arriving? Blah, blah, blah. Then like the night that they check in, that's when I hit them with the, like, we aim to provide a 5-star experience. So anything you need. So it's like, they know that's what I want, right?
Planted the seed and they're primed.
Exactly. They're primed. And then when they leave, I thank them, blah, blah, blah. And then I just say something along the lines of like, if you wouldn't, I thank them, have a safe travels home. If you wouldn't mind leaving us a review, we'd be very grateful. It helps people find us. And we're always looking for ways to elevate the experience for future guests. And so with all that, if they still don't leave me a review, I have learned not to chase them because I just don't. But like, it's like I have a process now. And so that makes things even easier for me. And it cuts out on my time of like crafting up stuff to say to them. And like, it's worked really well. I mean, both of my listings, I think my studio has, I want to say it's like 70 reviews and they're all 5 stars. Like my average is 5-star and same thing for my cabin. And so I'm like obsessed with 5-star reviews. That's like that's like getting a sale. I'm like, yes.
Well, it really is in a lot of ways.
Yes, exactly. Because now when people look up my listing, they can see that I host different properties and everything's 5-star. And so it's, I mean, again, like Airbnb is amazing and I'm obsessed with it. And even my twin, she did like a course that she made for people on curating your own space. And she pairs that with manifestation on how to get like your best type of guests. But I mean, I can't say enough good things about it. It's just literally the best. Oh, and side note, the thing is, it's like Airbnb, I don't make the same money that I did with medical sales. But to me, like my freedom is so much more valuable. So I used to work, I mean, when I was doing trauma, like 60 to 70 hours a week. Now I work like 6, and that's when I do my own cleans. And each of my spaces take 2 hours. And so I'm like, all right, cool. Like, yeah, maybe after everything is paid, you know, like now all of the Airbnb money for our studio goes towards our mortgage. And then our cabin, after the mortgage is paid and all the fees, our profit's about $4,000 a month. But we're like, it's an asset we own. It's still going to keep appreciating. And yeah, I'm not making those crazy big bonus checks like I used to in medical. But like, I'm with my husband 24/7. We're on the beach all the time. Like, I've never been as healthy and happy. And so for me, like, I feel the richest I've ever been in my whole life. So it's good.
I love your attention to detail and how you've just really honed and polished and navigated the best way for you and your business with Airbnb and your secret formula. I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, I find that like a lot of because I scoped out my competition hardcore in Byron. Like when I was making my listing, I was like, okay, let me look at all the 5-star properties. Let me see what they're offering. What's their price point? What do their reviews say? And so what I realize now is that like there aren't any properties, at least in my neighborhood, that are that are studios or one bedrooms that offer the same level of that offer as much value and like the same resources, like my guide and things like that. So yeah, I want to have the best product. It's like I'm just as competitive as I was.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yes.
I think the key to your success that's coming out from what you're sharing is becoming obsessional with what you're doing. Like you really took the time to research and perfect what you were offering, no matter what that was. It impacted your, success in your sales career, and then you took that into the next thing that you've done with Airbnbs. And I know you've got a number of things that you're doing on the side. But we just want to jump into our family segment as well and touch on. You mentioned it's you and your husband Brad.
Yes.
And did you want to share a little bit about your family dynamic and your, I guess, your choices in having children?
Oh yeah, no, I hope this could be helpful for someone because we started trying to have kids when I was still doing trauma, and so God, how long ago was that? Like 6-7 years ago, and we weren't falling pregnant, and I was devastated for like a number of reasons. I think because I'm so used to like achieving whatever I want. When I couldn't get pregnant, I was and it was like soul crushing, destroying, like unless you've gone through it, you can't really understand what it's like. And we tried multiple rounds of IVF for like 6 years. And, but the interesting thing is that after we moved to Byron, during COVID, I had gained, like most people, I had gained weight. And so I had I think 10 kilos, over 10 plus kilos to lose. So I was like, we had one embryo left. And this was before I turned 40. So this was last year. And I was like, cool, I'm going to get my body in like the best shape ever. So that like this last embryo, I know it's going to work. And so first I started with this detox because I was like, there's a lot. Well, it was really just to lose weight. But what ended up happening is that when I stopped like numbing myself with like alcohol and food, like I had been doing during COVID, I came to this realization that I actually didn't want kids, which is crazy because I had tried so hard for them for like 6 years. And the realization I had was like, oh, like I wanted kids because I thought they would give me this unconditional love that really like I wasn't giving myself and I didn't have for myself. I do now, which is great. But at the time, like I just, I realized that I didn't love myself. And I was like, oh, if I have kids, they're definitely going to love me and they're going to make me complete. And when I had that realization, I was like, oh shit. And I called my twin and I was like crying. And she was like, oh, my twin has 2 little kids. And she was like, my kids can be so mean to me. Like if you're looking for unconditional love from kids, you're crazy because it won't be. And she's like, they're a really big responsibility. And I was like, okay. So I came to that realization and my husband was so supportive and he and I, like, he supports like my woo-ness. And he was like, maybe another lifetime we had like 10 or 12 kids together. And so this lifetime for us is all about freedom. And we're about to turn 40, like we're very similar in age. And he's like, we live in the place we want to, like his business is thriving. And he's like, let's just be free to do whatever we want to do. So we ended up discarding our last embryo. We didn't even use it. And that was less than a year ago. And now I'm like, we're both kind of like, I love my nieces and like kids are a blessing and like somebody has to populate the planet. But like he and I are like, we feel so much more like we're just so happy. And the interesting thing is that what I've found, like in speaking to my girlfriends that have kids, is like my husband and I really have to be okay and like aligned with one another because we don't have any distractions like kids. Like I know my parents, for example, like they weren't really compatible or like they didn't really work on their marriage that much, but they were so distracted by all the kids they had that it wasn't until we were older that they were like, whoa, like we probably shouldn't be together. So what's happened with Brad and I, the fact that it's just the 2 of us, like we work so hard on our relationship, but we're also the happiest we've ever been. and it's just us. So it worked out. And he's like my biggest hype man, like anything weird that I want to do, like crazy. He's like supportive. And we just have this, and it hasn't always been this way. So I definitely don't want to like paint it that like everything between us has always been like, oh, we're the best ever. No, we've gone through our challenges for sure, for sure. But now we're just like, we feel like our life is just beginning. And part of that was the choice to stop trying to have kids. So for us, it didn't happen, but we're really glad it didn't.
I'm really interested in your relationship. So you've done a lot of different things. You've lived in 3 different countries. I'm counting.
We've lived. He never moved in to live. He never lived in America, but we've lived in 2 countries. Yes.
And you've started businesses, changed careers, moved from Melbourne to Byron, learning everything with Airbnbs. There's a lot going on. How did you keep your relationship alive, and what do you guys do to work on it? Because it can be really stressful starting something new and saying, if putting everything on the line, I'm sure there's so many moments where things can be quite tense.
Yeah. So this has been like a really interesting evolution of my perspective. And I know that it's not necessarily for everyone, but when I was in my 20s and 30s, my viewpoint on like the male and female, like my responsibility as like a female in the relationship was like, I need to go out and hustle and like contribute lots of money and like be like grinding like my husband is. But what's been really beautiful about the last, like, probably when I started, when I did Air Vendor, my perspective changed where I became a lot softer in like, it's okay. And this is just what works for me. I know it's not for everybody, but I allowed like my husband to take on like the masculine dominant role as like caretaker, provider, protector, and it's like totally changed our relationship because I don't know if it must be like biological, psychological, but he really feels like he's like taking care of his family and his wife, and he supports me in everything I do. But the expectation isn't on me to be out there, the one that's like hustling, grinding hard. But in return, I like totally support him. So like, I'm always like hyping up his big dreams. I always tell him like, you can do anything you want, babe. Like we spend so much time together now. So I'm like cooking for him. We spend a lot of time together. We go for walks every day. And so I've definitely like settled into a more traditional feminine role in the relationship. And for us, that's worked really, really well because he's like, whatever, biology, evolution, all the things, like he's being the hunter and I'm the one that's like at home, like nurturing the home and like making the choices about our furniture. And like, I buy his clothes for him and like, but all those things that when I was in college, I'd have been like, like I was like total more feminist when I was younger. And, but now I'm just like, no, like it's okay for me to be taken care of and it's okay for me to be softer and like I can just back my man and like have him because his business is like way more successful than anything I've ever done, but that's totally okay. Like I'm not in competition with him and I'm like, go you babe, because when you win, we win. And like, I'll be here to like make your breakfast, like, because at the moment he's working on site, he's renovating our house. And literally that's my job is that like, because we're living in one of the Airbnbs and then we have the one I'm in now, one of our trades is staying here. So I don't have anything really like that's occupying most of my time, but like I make his dinner, like I run his bath, I make sure the house is clean, like, so we have like a bath together at night and he drinks wine and, and we just talk about our day and I listen to him, his stresses about finances and all that stuff. Because I don't deal with any of the finances either. Like I let him take care of it. And when like one of our businesses or one of our ventures, like a joint venture needs resources, then we talk about it and he handles it. And so I never, if I would have told like my 28-year-old self this, I would be like, red flags, get out of there, But for me at this stage of my life, I'm almost 41. I'm like, no, like I want to be taken care of and I want, like, this is the dynamic that works really well. And my husband really loves it. And I do too. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's kind of a lot, but. that's where we're at.
But in all honesty as well, I remember when you were kind of stepping more into your feminine, it was challenging for you to let go of, or like kind of like a bruised ego of how much you wanted to contribute to your household. So
Yes.
it's beautiful to see you in kind of at peace now. It's really, you're so happy.
I'm so happy. Well, it's like a lot less stressful when you don't have to worry about, like, well, when I don't have to take on all the stress about certain things like finances or
Yeah.
like, but those are things that like Brad loves to do. So for us, that
leaving the strengths, letting him play into his strengths and then you into yours as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And he loves to be taken care of. So I like it. But it's working.
We'll be back
After a short break. This conversation is sponsored by Strider Movement.
Strider Soul's Comfort Cork insoles unique trigger point system provides an optimal level of comfort, guidance, and support between your feet and the ground.
Their natural cork design allows the insoles to mold to the shape of your feet over time, providing individual support to the natural shape of your feet.
A truly balanced insole for comfort, reducing pressure and relieving stressed areas from your feet up. Nava listeners receive 10% off their purchase at checkout with code NAVA. That's NAVA.
Now let's get back to our conversation.
It's really interesting how your views on feminism have changed over time and the different things that you've learned. It's not necessarily that one is more feminine than the other or one is right and one is wrong. It's just about meeting the season that you're at and moving into that space.
Yes. So much acceptance.
Yeah, I think that's something I personally have learned as well, moving from career in architecture to teaching and then to being a mom and starting this. You really evolve and change and soften, but also become stronger.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I relate to what you're saying.
It is. Yeah. And just like knowing who you are. Like I just like the more the years go by, I'm like, oh, like I know I'm more comfortable with myself than I've ever been. And it just feels really good. So, but I guess we'll see where we're at in 10 years. I might be like, and I might change my mind and that's okay. Like I'm more at peace now also with change and being like what I thought yesterday. I may not believe tomorrow, but like, that's okay. I'm just figuring it out.
I feel like we have spoken about so many amazing things and there's so much I am dying to ask you. But we're going to step into our lifestyle and fashion segments, and then we'll wrap up into our NAVA acronym. So we kind of just want to start with, I know that self-care and rituals have been a huge part of your life. Can you talk to us or give us like your top 2 tips on how to stay grounded in your routine? I know obviously previously you mentioned writing things down in extreme detail is really helpful in kind of providing clarity with where you're going and what you're wanting to achieve. Yes. So yeah, what would your top 2 tips be in self-care and self-care rituals?
Okay, so wake up early is the first one. Like if you have to be like, my day starts at the moment at 7, but I wake up at 4:45 so that I have time to take a walk. Like I get my 10,000 steps in first thing in the morning, and then I can come back and do my 30-minute meditation, which is like, like a few different things that I do. But like I notice that when I wake up earlier, because some people are like, oh God, could I wake up at like 4 if I had to? But you have so much more energy in the day. So my top tip would be wake up early. Like if you have to start the day at 7, then wake up at 5. If you have to be out of the door at 6, then you should be waking up at 4. And I at least that's my experience. There's so many things that I don't have, like kids. So I know that totally changes things. But for me, it's like wake up early.
And you've always done that, right? Throughout your sales career too.
Always. As soon as I learned about like manifestation and morning routines and how they like supercharge and making lists. So like waking up early and making lists are my 2 top things. As soon as I figured out like, oh, like waking up early, and the whole waking up early bubble encompasses like exercise, meditation, writing things down, like figuring out what I need to do for the day. And then, yeah, so those are my top 2 tips.
And I guess with writing your list, it seems before, even with the language that you were intentional about with your reviews and the messaging you try to send your guests, it seems that probably another to tie into the list is the power of words.
Yes. Oh my God, the power of words. There's actually like science behind this, which is so cool. When my sister and we talked about this at length on her podcast that she has. We like your words actually carry an energetic like signature frequency, and there have been like scientific experiments done. I don't know. Have you guys heard of that? Where the guy like spoke hateful words into water and then froze it, and then looking under a microscope. Do you guys know about this experiment?
You do?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Oh, I haven't.
Yeah, so like if they said words like "I hate you," da da da, you look at it under a microscope once the water is frozen, and it's like shards. But if you if you say like "I love you," da da da, like loving words or whatever, it's like bubbles, and it's like perfectly round, and nothing's broken. It's like all beautiful. And IKEA even did an experiment with this around houseplants, and they had like they did it at one of their flagship stores because there was a campaign around bullying and like about how really negative words like actually affect us on an energetic level. And so they had different groups, like one group of plants would say like all variables were controlled. So they got the same amount of water, same amount of sunlight, et cetera, et cetera. But one group of plants like had bullying words said to them. One said like kind, supportive words, and one said nothing. And then the ones that had the bullying words, like their leaves drooped, they turned brown. Like, so this is all to say that with the words you have, like, I really believe that what you say, like, creates your reality. And it like either like
it amplifies it.
100%.
Mm.
So I'm always really intentional with my words. And we used to do that when we worked together as well. When we would talk about like a sale or something.
Everything in terms of goal setting, the sales cycle, the customer experience, everything was really intentional and around, the power of the language.
For sure. It's totally a thing.
What is your favorite piece from your properties? Or what's your maybe what's your go-to piece that you always like to include?
Let me see. Well, so in our house now where we worked with interior designers, like we did like sort of like a level up of what we normally do. And God, like my favorite piece, I would have to say, it's interesting. They're my favorite piece, but also once I got them, I was like, this isn't that big of a deal. They're this beautiful vintage Adu Manet chairs. They're French vintage. And they're beautiful. And like, I always was like, oh, I definitely want these. It was like basically like a manifestation that I wanted, like a goal that I had set. And then we bought them. And then now I'm like, like my nieces can't sit on them. Like no one's going to be able to sit on them because they cost so much. But that's probably not a good answer to your question. In terms of like go-to, I just like always adding like softness to a space. So whether that's like, for example, where I'm sitting now, we did like a built-in bench seat, and it has like a beautiful custom cushion on it that has like a chambray with like a leather piping, and on the couch, like beautiful feather pillows, like anything to make a space cozy and let people be like, okay, we can actually relax here. It's not a showpiece, and we can relax and have fun. And so, like pillows and like blankets. That's probably like a basic response, but it's true.
I was going to ask about, I know that you love color palettes and color profiling. Are you able to
color analysis?
Oh, sorry, yes. Color analysis. Sorry. Are you able to share a little snippet of color analysis and how that impacts you? And has that actually tied into your color choices for your new place?
Yes. Okay. So I'm obsessed with something called color analysis. I found this woman, if anyone listening wants to look her up, her name is Carol Brailey, CarolBrailey. She has like 30,000 followers on Instagram, but she has like hundreds of thousands on TikTok. And I found one of her videos, and the whole premise of color analysis is that basically the colors that you wear and like the color of your hair, for example, it should all be about letting you shine, so that people aren't like, oh, she has nice hair, or that's a nice dress. They look at you. And so the whole premise of it is like, are you ready to be seen? And that has been such a theme of my life over the last year when I, lost my COVID weight and, deciding not to have kids and all the things. Like, it was just a time in my life where I was like, okay, I'm ready for people to see me. I'm not hiding behind anything. So it was, TikTok probably reads your mind. And so I was like, this perfect video came up, and I got my colors done by this woman in Canada, and by Carol. And it was, at the time I was blonde, and I had been like blonde since I was, like 18. And I was like deluded thinking I was a natural blonde, even though I wasn't. But at the end, she gave me my results, and she's like, you're a true autumn. And, you look best in jewel tones. And she's like, also, you need to dye, like, you need to go back to your natural hair color or darker. Like, what blonde is washing you out. It's doing you no favors. And I was like, it was basically like a therapy session, because I was like, no, like, my husband loves blondes. Like, I can't do this. And it ended up, she really was like a therapist. She's like, well, do you think you're a natural blonde? And I was like, I guess not. I was when I was 3, And so, but because I was so committed at the time to like, all right, I want to be seen. Like, I'm ready to. I'm 40 years old. Like, I'm not hiding behind anything anymore. I live in the place I want to. Like, I want to live my life the way I want to. I don't care what, like, it was like a whole culmination of like leaving corporate as well. And like the ego, tricks that try to come with like, oh, are people going to think I'm like a loser now? And like, like, am I not going to be important to anyone anymore? And like, my identity was so closely tied with medical device for so long but I was like, I need to like become myself. So I went hard with the color palette thing. As you know, Stella, I like purged my whole wardrobe. I dyed my hair dark. I did all the things, and I like have never felt more like beautiful, vibrant. And I tell everybody, like, go get your colors done, because you don't like, it's for people that want to be seen. But like, it's the best investment I've ever made, and one of the best investments I've ever made in myself ever. It wasn't crazy expensive. I even got my husband's colors done like secretly, and took all the pictures I was supposed to. And I think it was like $200 or something, 200 Aussie. And but now I buy all of his stuff aligned with his palette, and it's like wild how it has changed my life. So the interesting thing was that the color palette that I am, which is true autumn, which is like jewel tones, like no silvers, no blacks, no whites. I always gravitated toward those colors anyway. But whenever I would try to like try something new, and then I would do that, and then it would look crap on me. But another like side note is that with color analysis, I had first heard about it 10 years ago. I was meeting with an executive of a large hospital, and she had like this really colorful scarf on, and she told me I should get my colors done. And at the time I had like bleach blonde hair, a gray turtleneck on, which is so not my colors. So she was probably like, ugh. Like, it did not look, there are people that gray looks amazing on. My husband is one, but it's not me. But I find like, I tell, especially my friends that, I tell everyone, literally everyone, even like the tradesmen on site. Stella, I was telling you, like, I think I told both of you guys before we started, like, I've been diagnosing people being like, I think you're a spring, I think you're a summer, but like, I give out this woman's contact to anyone. Maybe you guys can put it in the show notes, because it really is that life changing.
We're definitely doing it.
Oh my God, you have to. Like, it's wild. And it's all about like, are you ready to be seen? And it's, it's so much more than like getting your colors done so that you buy stuff that you look good in. It's like, are you ready for people to actually see you? Because like, at least for me, like what I realized until recently is that like, I hid behind so many different things. And, so I would definitely, it's my number one, like top tip for everybody. Go get your colors done. It's amazing.
All right, so we'll move on to our very last segment, which is we have made Nava acronym. Mm-hmm. We've got navigate, aspire, value, and achieve. And basically, each of these words explore an essential aspect of personal or professional growth. It's a little takeaway for our guests to, I guess, summarize you and what you've been doing.
Okay, great. So what is N is navigate?
Yes. So we'll ask a question based on.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, great. I'm ready.
All right. Go for it. Okay. Navigate. What advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur who is starting their journey, apart from get their colors?
Yeah, exactly. Just do it. because even if you like fail at like your first attempt or even your second attempt, or like if you fail based on what you think success is for that endeavor, you're still going to learn so much. Like I failed so many times on the journey and I'm still failing, but like I don't look at like in terms of navigating the process, I just don't look at it as like, oh, well, that now I'm over and like my life is over. I'm just like, okay, I learned that lesson and now I can move on and try something like pivot and do something different. So just get started. Just get started.
That's so true. And especially as a teacher, all the learning comes from the mistake, not getting it right.
Yes, exactly. Like fail as quickly as you can.
That was the first bit of advice you gave me when I started in my medical device job. You were like, just get the reps in and fail, like fail. And that will lead to the biggest success.
100%. And then you're like training your brain to not be so traumatized by the potential of failure. Like you just rewire your brain to be like, okay, I'm just going to take action no matter what. And it really does, like there's science behind it about like taking action, even if you don't know what the right thing to do is, but it's like you prime yourself to like not be so scared of failure when you just take action. So just do it.
Take the next step.
Yeah.
So the next letter is, the next word is aspire. Can you share any advice for listeners who may be aspiring to make a similar transition from a stable career into following their entrepreneurial dreams?
Like start small. Like that is because you don't have to like what I didn't realize when I started the first company with my with my sister and brother-in-law was that like I thought I had to like create this big thing and like be a disruptor and like, oh, go do this big company and career. And it's like, no, like now I'm freaking running an Airbnb out of my house, It's like, and it's like way more rewarding and all the things, but like, it's like, we kind of get into our egos about like how, like, it needs to be something that I can be proud of. And like, when I leave my current job, like, I want to be able to be like, yeah, I'm starting this new company. And for me, at least, it was just all my ego. So just start small, like do like a side. I know Stella, you and I have talked about this a lot, but like what's cool about Airbnb is that like, we all have some kind of asset that we can monetize on the side. So like whether that's part of your house that you don't live in, whether that's like a spare bedroom, whether that's like a car that you don't use on weekends and so you can rent it out to other people, I was at the petrol station this morning and like there's a guy that owns a trailer and he rents it out for like $70 for 4 hours. And it's just like a trailer he has, but when he's not using it. So like there are things that you can monetize and it doesn't have to be this like thing that you pump hundreds of thousands of dollars into, like, to build this thing and then you have no customers and you're like, what the hell did I do that for? Which was the case with Airbnb at first. So
what I'm hearing is it's like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel always. It's look at what you've got at your disposal and let's maximize that. Start small and see where it takes you.
Start small. And then you start building confidence by the fact that you're making money off something and you're like, oh my God, like I can make money not from my corporate job or my like whatever else you're doing. Like and then it's like your little business that you're running. And then you just, so, and maybe it's $100 extra a week or 200, but like, that's still a significant amount of money. So yeah.
I feel like you've kind of already answered this, but I might rephrase it in a way. So the question was value. How do you prioritize self-worth and self-care in your personal and professional life? So you spoke a little bit about waking up early and going for walks and spending time meditating.
Mm-hmm.
How did you always do that when you were working in corporate to Airbnb now? Or do you feel like that was a little bit more of a shift when you made that lifestyle change when you decided to not pursue having children?
No, so I've always been, I started like with the waking up early and like my morning routines. I started that because I was stressed out about like hitting my targets at work. And I found a book about manifesting and it was called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. And it was basically like the science behind waking up early, your morning routine, like writing affirmations, da, 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 da. And so to answer your question, I started doing that about 12 years ago, but no, 10 years ago, but I started doing it purely to be like, I need to hit my number. It wasn't like, it had a great knock-on effect for everything else. But once I was like, oh, I can do this thing that like makes me feel good. And also 100% like creates these crazy results. And like, I'm all about like, what's the methodology? Like, okay, like if I want this thing, like, how do I get that? What are the steps to it? And then I found that methodology. So as much as I want to be like, oh, like I loved, I've always been a meditator and that's just my vibe. Like, that's so not my vibe. I am very intense. I'm very like, like, what's the word? Like I have a method for everything that I do. And so this is just, I do it because I know that it will help me achieve what I want. So I don't know if that answers your question, but like, yeah, I've done it for like the last 10 years.
It does. And I think it ties into the self-worth piece as well, because you, as a salesperson, like I can speak to this, your self-worth is so closely tied to the sales that you make and hitting your number. And if you don't make your number, it's like you feel like a loser, you feel like the worst salesperson ever.
Yes.
And so I guess to elaborate on Leah's question, what were some of the things you did to keep your self-worth high throughout all the things that you've been doing in your life? And it seems like you're in a place now where I guess you've always backed yourself and stepped into your worth in order to achieve things, but now you've kind of pushed aside the ego and you seem really super happy.
Yes, I've always like backed myself, but that was definitely, well, it's like I backed myself, but I always had the voice in my head that was like, you're dumb, you're this, you're that. Like, I don't know. I would say that this is like literally the first time in my life in the last like 8 months where I don't have that voice. And like, but even when I was like meditating, all the things like, oh my God, no, I had like crazy imposter syndrome. I thought that like, everybody thought that I was weird and like no one liked me. And like, all those voices are like, I'm a loser. Like that was my biggest shadow that I've worked through, is that like, I'm a loser. And then it's like, how the fuck am I a loser? Like, like now I can laugh about it. I remember calling you at times, Stella, and I'm like, I feel like such a big loser. And you'd be like, what are you talking about? So like, no, like that I'm a loser piece, I had to do like a lot of unpacking, like, like my own, again, this is like very woo, but like inner child stuff and like going through my shadows and where did I pick that up from? Like, why do I think I'm a loser? Because when I actually evaluate my life, I'm winning in a lot of ways, but no, I felt like until recently, like I felt like a massive loser. And sometimes I still have days where I'm like, I am a freaking loser. And I have to really like bring myself back. If I didn't have those daily practices of like meditating and working out and like, spending time with my husband to like bring me back, like I definitely still have days where I feel like a total loser, but at least I can talk about it now and be like, that sounds so stupid. Like, of course I'm not a loser, but I still have those days. I think it's normal. I don't know. It's all, what are your guys' shadows?
Hey, if living your best life in Byron and having an incredible relationship that you get to enjoy, and if that makes you a loser, then I want to be a loser too.
Thanks. I think it's just like no matter what you achieve, you can still have those days,
We're always going to be our biggest critics.
For sure.
The last part of the acronym is ACHIEVE. How did you maintain perseverance and dedication in the face of challenges and setbacks?
I mean, I just kept going. Like I didn't really have a choice in a lot of things, like in medical device, for example, like for the first 5 years of my husband's building business in Melbourne, we had sold all the properties that he had in the UK. We did all of those like to invest in his first project. Then like, even when you make profit, that has to go back into the business to like buy more projects and float everything. So you have a viable business. Like he didn't make a wage. He didn't make a wage for 5 years. And so I really didn't have an option. Like this was before I started Air Vendor, but like, those were the most like challenging times in a way, but like, I guess I just didn't like, there was no option. So I was like, I knew I had this way to make a lot of money, which was medical sales. And I chose the division of medical sales that makes the most money, but also you work the most. And I was just like, I just have to do it. So like, you just have to keep taking, I just kept taking action. I didn't have a choice, really.
And that's something you always say to me is just take the next step, like less thought.
Yes.
Let's just take the next step, because next action leads to more action.
For sure. And I get caught up in that too. Like my brain always wants to go to the end result and be like, what does this mean? And what is this going to be? And what is the end result? But like my mantra for the year is like, what is the next step? And just focus on that. It doesn't matter, because what could be created for us, like in your reality, is probably so much better than anything you could ever imagine, or just so much more cool and like successful, all the things. And like, if you try to put your own like human brain on it and be like, or like using your past experience to try to predict what this thing is going to be, you're actually like limiting it so much. And so for me, I'm just like, and we talk about this all the time, it's like, just do the next step, because like whatever that next step is, you can focus on that. And then it's just like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And then you get a lot of stuff done. So, but I'm sure you guys have, like with you guys creating your podcast and all the things, like, it's just like, you just do the next thing, right?
Totally. And then it's like a snowball effect. And then you're like, okay, we're doing it. And it's the best. But I think a lot of our listeners, just a lot of people in general, would relate to that. And self-sabotage creeps in and it holds you back from taking that next step. But once you do it, you step into your worth and you're like, take the next step. Then that just, it takes you to where you need to be.
Yeah. And it takes the pressure off, because you're like, I don't have to worry about what this has to be right now. Let me just do this next thing.
Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah, just do it.
Oh, this has been so amazing. We've had such a beautiful conversation. I feel like we could keep talking to you for hours.
I know.
So much for joining us. Leah, did you have any other questions?
No, I guess just, was there anything else before we close that you'd want to share with our listeners?
No, I feel like that's been it. I feel like they know a lot more about me than a lot of people do. So, yeah.
Beautiful. And did you want to plug your Airbnb?
Yeah. So if you look it up, we're Tied on Talos. That's our cabin. And then the other one is Swell Studio. And if you look up, basically we're on Talos Beach, Suffolk Park, but you'll see it. We're the only like 1-bedroom studios in the whole neighborhood that have all 5-star reviews. And we also have a website, merlotpropertyrentals.com. And that is where we house like both listings. And so if you go there, then you will find both places.
Amazing. And I've stayed at Tied on Talos and had the best week ever with my boyfriend. It's right on the beach. The interior and the finishings are just so high end. A really beautiful stay.
It was the best. Your boyfriend and my husband are like besties. Well, Brad wants to be his bestie, but so yeah, that was awesome.
I feel like Stella and I have to have a night over there.
Oh my God, yes. You guys could do like a Nava retreat.
Definitely.
Yes.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks, Amber.
Thanks, Amber.
Okay, bye.
Bye.